This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The download recap is brought to you by Podscribe. You can find out more at podscribe.com. This week on the docket, I have for you the live connection, why podcasts need to get off the internet and into the room, looking back at Cannes Lions, and despite economic uncertainty, the advertising market is still primed for growth. Let's get started. Actually, before I get into the news proper, a quick scheduling heads up. This coming Thursday, June 26th, Sounds Profitable and SiriusXM Media / SiriusXM Podcast Network are hosting a free webinar at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Unlock the power of purpose-driven podcasting will focus on two of podcasting's fastest growing audiences, health and fitness and self-improvement. Webinar host Tom Webster and Alexandra Kajia will break down how these audiences use podcasts to build daily routines, the surprising social role recommendations play in their content choices, and why these genres lead in openness to brand integrations and celebrity-hosted shows. Registration is free and currently open. Go grab your digital seat now. Live shows are not a new development in podcasting. There are some Welcome to Night Vale superfans out there who've racked up enough ticket stubs over the past 12 years of live shows to impress a Fish fan. But there's more to podcast live events than just ticket sales and running a merch table. Article writer Tom Webster starts with the importance of community and authenticity. I know personally I've typed up something about the importance and power of authenticity in podcasts and podcast advertising at least once a month for the past 3 years I've been writing the download. As the waters of media become more and more crowded with AI-generated content, genuine human-made content and human connection is becoming more of a boutique offering. Here's a quote from Webster in the article, quote, "Live events are becoming the ultimate proof of concept for podcasters. They're where you demonstrate that you actually know your stuff, that your insights aren't just well-edited AI-assisted content, and that's where you can deliver value where there's no delete key, no retakes, and no algorithm to fall back on. I've seen this firsthand at conferences where attendees will wait in line for 20 minutes just to say hello to their favorite host. These aren't just fans, they're customers waiting to happen. But increasingly, they're also conducting a kind of informal authenticity audit. The question is whether we're giving them something worth buying, and more importantly, whether we're proving we're actually worth following." End quote. And with that comes the value of monetizing live events. Lest we forget, Dropout's Dimension 20 has put on sold-out shows at Madison Square Garden and the Hollywood Bowl just this year. But even with podcast events outside the usual live show format, there's a rich field of untapped monetization potential. VIP experiences, meet and greets, branded lounge spaces, networking cocktail hours, experiential marketing adds a lot of value on top of pure ticket sales. Not to mention the valuable content generated by the event taking place. A show recording to sell to audiences with fear of missing out for not attending in person, highlight clips to share on social media, driving that FOMO, video content showing genuine interaction with audiences, and weeks of newsletters inspired by organic conversations had at the event. Cannes Lions was this week, meaning a fair few decision makers in the world of advertising took to the beaches of Cannes to make deals. A cabana factors in at one point, though my sources unfortunately tell me the Copacabana was not important. At the beginning of the week, Digiday wrote up a vibe check for day one. A dark cloud hung over the event in the form of notable faces not attending this year. 2025 marks a Cannes where ad executives who do business in the United States but don't hold permanent citizenship are worried about potential issues at the border upon trying to re-enter the country, and they've opted to simply stay in the United States and skip the trip to France this year. Reportedly, there's a bigger focus on efficiency compared to more extravagant, chill routes of Cannes Lions legacy. Improvisational business meet-cutes on yachts have been transitioned into tightly programmed meeting blocks that maximize productivity and make the trip a worthwhile expense. Also on Monday, the massively popular chat program WhatsApp announced it would start showing ads in-app for the first time. The ads will be located in the update section, and the company has been adamant that it has no plans to place ads in chats or personal messages. As everything becomes advertising to some extent, it's worth keeping the perspective of podcasting. Ads have always been present since the beginning. Audiences are acclimated to podcast ads, and they respond more positively to the brands involved in podcasts than any other format. Later on in the week, Digiday returned with another recap, this one with a running theme, brands going beyond the usual dabbling in entertainment to formally investing in it. For example, Dentsu announced a global focus on sports and entertainment from their beach cabana. See, I didn't lie. There's also a shift towards marketers caring about the creative side of businesses in addition to the traditional sales partnerships. Formats have taken a backseat to overall content slates, and marketers now care who a particular publisher has attached to projects, not just what is happening in the project. Creators are now actively part of the deal-making conversation, even when not physically in the room themselves. As the headline of this one says, despite economic uncertainty, the advertising market is still primed for growth. Even with the current state of the economy being kind of wibbly, global advertising revenue is trending upwards in Magna's latest global ad forecast. In the report, global ad revenue for media owners is expected to reach $979 billion USD this year. That's up 4.9% from 2024. A quote from Joanna Gerber's reporting, quote, "In particular, search and retail media are continuing to grow, offsetting the loss of revenue from other channels. Magna predicts these channels will grow 8% to $359 billion, end quote. Meanwhile, as Inside Audio Marketing reporting on the same Magna report shows, it anticipates the U.S. ad market will grow 6.9% this year, which excludes cyclical ad spending. Technically, overall audio sales are expected to drop 2% in the United States, but with the context that this stat is for overall audio. If we break it down a little bit, digital audio advertising is forecast to increase 3.7%, while over-the-air radio is expected to decline 3.2%. Some areas might be in decline, but the home of podcasting is continuing an upward trend throughout the year. Fingers crossed. Finally, it's time for my quick hits. These are articles that I've covered this week, but didn't quite make the cut as a top story. I still argue passionately they're worth including in your weekend reading. First up, the Audio Production Awards presented by Audio UK and Audible are back for their 15th year of celebrating excellence in the UK's podcasting scene. Early bird entries are now open through August 31st, with a final deadline of Wednesday, September 17th. Speaking of dates, coming up this coming Wednesday, June 25th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, MoneyWise producer Jackie Lampert and Lower Street founder Harry Morton will be hosting an hour-long webinar going over the process of taking a $150,000 a month audio podcast and converting it to video production, including unfiltered metrics and observations about the process. Anthony Vargas of Ad Exchanger interviews several industry pros about AudioHook and how the DSP is aiming to bring viewability back with a new podcast panel with a pool of 250,000 US-based podcast listeners. SoundStack has announced they are collaborating with the Associated Press to be their audio streaming partner. Cumulus Media and Signal Hill Insights have published a spring edition of their podcast download report, which includes the finding that audio remains the primary mode of how audiences consume podcasts, ranking in at 58% with respondents. Finally, health and spirituality podcast Almost 30 has signed on to the Yap Media Network, with the network facilitating DAI podcast ads, custom integrations, and 360-degree creative campaigns as of this week. That was the download recap brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know I went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or on the download section of soundsprofitable.com. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Barletta, and Tom Webster. Special thanks, once again, to you for sticking with me as I brought you all the top stories you might have missed from this past week. Robot?
Download complete.